In this video, I'll talk about the pros and cons of the 12 o'clock piggyback or top mounted red dot versus the offset red dot. Also give some demonstrations between the two. The combination of these optic systems is to get the most performance out of one rifle in a common term of a do-it-all rifle or do-it-all optic system. A single optic doesn't do great at everything, which is why it's usually added upon. The ACOG isn't good at close range, which is why the red dot supplements in that area. Red dot by itself isn't good at long range, which is why a magnifier is typically added. LPVOs or scopes aren't great at close range, which it's common to see a red dot added to that as well. Magnified optics lack in the speed category at 0 to 50 yards, which is where the red dot comes in handy. Whether it's top mounted or offset really depends on a lot of factors like the specific optic you're using. On the ACOG, it's very common to see the top mounted red dot, whereas with LPVOs, it's a little bit more common to see the offset. Other factors come into play such as personal preference, facial structure, whether it might be bigger or skinnier, if you have a longer neck or longer jaw. Some of these things can come into play more on what feels comfortable person to person, the type of body type you have, or even just what you're used to using. I'll start with the top mounted, give a demonstration to that, and then I'll switch over to the offset. For the top dot mounted pros, the main use case is going to be CQB close quarter use, gas mask, or night vision use. Because it's mounted upward and vertically, it's going to be easier and superior to passively aim with night vision. When using a gas mask, you usually can't get a good cheek weld because these have the filter on it or it's puffed out. So having that up higher, it's going to be easier to see and aim with that. High mounts are common for CQB and also being able to clear your laser if you have one. It gives a lot of peripheral vision without having to hunch down super low. It keeps you aware of your surroundings. The appeal to this is that your head and neck is in a more straight and comfortable position to where it's not putting a lot of strain on my neck. More natural or common shooting position, a similar shooting style as shooting with your primary optic or any of your other rifles. It's streamlined with the rifle, so it keeps a slick profile going up and down. It can also be easier to zero since it's in an inline position, depending on the optic and the mount you're using. For this example, this T-Rex Arms Arasaka top mounted red dot for the ACOG TAO2 is going to be lighter than the offset red dot mount by Arasaka. Regards to CQB, because it's straight in line with the rifle, it's going to be easier to peek around different corners, whether you're at a threshold or a door. And it's also going to be easier to switch shoulders if you have to or want to or train for that. If you're under a barricade, you might be able to get some shots off easier with that. Or if you're laying underneath a car, you're going to be able to line up that red dot easier in a laying sideways position. We'll switch to the cons for the top mounted red dot, and the main one is going to be your height over bore. We have 3.2 inches from the rail to the center line of the red dot. Height over bore of 4 1/8 inches from the center line of the optic to the center line of the bore. You have to be more mindful of your hold overs and hold unders, because when you're aiming up close, say 5 or 10 yards, and you pull the trigger and the dot is right, say on the head box, it's not going to land directly on the head box. Your shots at different distances are going to land above or below where you pulled the trigger when your dot was on that specific piece of the target. It requires an extra layer of training. You have to remember your holds. You have to know your holds at different distances to be accurate with your shots. More reps to get used to that and get that ingrained in your brain. A taller profile to the rifle since it's mounted on top, getting about an extra inch or two up above. So this can be a snag hazard, and a vertical form factor of things that it can get scratched on or bumped. What the mount height of the rifle is, or what optic you're mounting it to when you have this top mounted red dot, is that you're going to get a chin weld and not a solid foundation of a cheek weld when you're shouldering the rifle. This is going to depend where you place your rifle, going to depend on your structure, your cheek. You know, if you have more surface area here, a longer chin, a longer neck. I get a little bit of my chin weld here, so it still is manageable. But on the LPVO I had before, it was a 1.75 inch mount height, and then I had this mounted on top. I had no cheek weld at all, so I was shooting without that fourth point of contact. The problem that causes is that it makes it a little bit less stable of a shooting platform since you have less surface area on your face. Harder to keep track of the dot or keep it in a smaller, unchanging position because it's a less point of contact or an inferior point of contact. It can be more difficult to control recoil, or it can be more difficult to have faster follow-up shots like doubles or triples. Another thing that takes more reps, training, and getting used to is transitioning from your primary optic to the red dot, up and back down, to get a consistent eye relief on the primary optic, and then to go back up to where your dot is in the center. It's going to increase my silhouette and my profile when I'm shooting over top of certain covers, like say a mound of dirt or a car hood. Since I have to bring my head up a little higher, my head is going to be more exposed since that mount height is taller, and my silhouette is going to be more visible since I'm in an upright position and I can't get as low behind that cover. Prone or low angle shooting positions, if I'm laying down and I have to stick my head up way high to be able to see, that can be a little bit harder to do, a little awkward, just not as comfortable. The last for the con is that if your primary mount is compromised, say it gets loosened or damaged, or you're not able to tighten it back down at that period of time or fix it, that would then compromise my top mounted dot and affect the zero. It makes it even more important that if you're using a system like this, or if you're using an offset and it's connected to your primary optic, that your primary optic mount is secure. It's not going to go anywhere. It's mounted correctly, so there is no compromising of your second optic. My neck and head are in a more upright position. I can see around a little bit more. This is going to be more comfortable on my neck. There's room for nods. I don't have to get as much of a cheek weld on there for gas mask use. Having this in a similar shooting style, it's going to be more common to what you're used to on your other builds. Switching to different shoulders if I have to. It's in that same position, so switching and peeking around corners going to be a lot easier to do that. For the sideways position, if you're under a car, I can do that easier. Or if I'm in more unconventional shooting positions of leaning, I don't have a cheek weld. It's of the low part of my chin, so it's more of a chin weld, but this ACOG mount is smaller, allowing for at least some chin weld, which is better than none at all. I still have some chin weld there to where I can have a point of contact, but it's not a cheek weld like I have on the ACOG here. Transitions, it's not difficult, but it takes a few reps to be able to get a consistent transition between the optics. Sometimes when I'm doing it, I'm a little bit off on the eye relief, or the optics not centered in the dot. More training to be able to switch back and forth. You can still do it quickly, but there can be some inconsistencies to know how much you need to slide up and down to transition. If this was on the top of a car or on top of a mound, I would be here, so my head is a little bit more exposed because my head is up higher. It's going to increase my silhouette and my profile, as opposed to down here, I'm ducked down a few more inches closer to that part of cover. Now I'll talk about the pros and cons of offset red dots. More typically seen in competitive shooting with LPVOs or longer range rifles. The biggest pro is lower height over bore. There's much less holding over or under if you have to at all, since it's at that common height. there's going to be very little difference at ranges, especially up close. It's on the same height as your primary optic. For this Arasaka offset mount, we have a 1.5 to 1.8 inch center line, which adds about an inch to your height over bore. So 2.5 to 2.8 inches height over bore from the center line of your optic to the center line of your bore. You don't have to remember those holds as much. This can allow for a faster target acquisition. It's a smooth and a quick transition between your primary and your red dot. All you have to do is roll the rifle. You don't have to lift your head at all or change your posture. It can also allow for faster close range engagements. Being in line with your primary optic, it's going to provide a consistent cheek weld a little bit up higher on your face, not as much of the chin weld. It's also going to promote stability and accuracy, having that fourth point of contact that's a little bit more secure, accurate follow-up shots, or a little bit faster shooting in general. Because the offset mount is completely separate from my primary ACOG mount, if anything happens to this, my offset red dot is still in good working order. The zero is not compromised and the mount is not compromised because they are separate and detached. For your LPVOs, where you might have the offset that is attached to the mount, that would not be the case. So it just depends what optic and mounting system you're going with, if your offset is attached to the mount or not. But having these separate gives two different solutions that act independently of each other. So if one were to fail for one reason due to a mounting issue, you still have one aiming solution. Switching over to the cons of the offset mount, because it hangs off to the side, it has an increased snag factor on this right side, and it also increases the profile towards the right, making the gun a little bit thicker. Having the flashlight on the left and the offset on the right makes the rifle wider overall. To make it a little bit more streamlined, you could switch the flashlight to the right side, add a pressure pad or some type of switch. Having the flashlight on the left side provides a little bit of a protector of the burn factor of the suppressor. If you let it rest down towards your leg and you have a hot suppressor, it's less likely to burn you because the flashlight would then rest against your leg. Also, having the offset closer to the ejection port, this can get a little bit more dirty depending on where the gases go. My last offset mount on the LPVO, I didn't find that it was making the red dot itself dirty. It was just putting some carbon buildup more on the bottom of the mount. Kind of depends where you have the optic mounted, more likely of a chance to get dirty. Having to prop that up in a certain way in a canted position, if you don't have a good stable and inline mounting position to be able to zero the rifle, that can be a little bit more tricky trying to get it lined up and to get consistent shots for a good zero. If you're only zeroing out to 50 yards, I don't see that as a big problem. If you're going out to 100, it can cause some problems if the offset mount is not actually in line with the barrel. It can also be less comfortable, and it's usually not as common to your normal shooting position. If you're coming out and you're having to cant that elbow at an angle and roll the rifle, your wrist could be canted. More difficult to use in close quarters or CQB, trying to peek around doors whichever way. Since it's on the right side, it's kind of favoring peeking that one side. If you have to peek to the left, or especially having to switch shoulders, not going to be ideal for switching to the left shoulder. Personally, I'm not big on switching shoulders. I want to be in a confident shooting position on my right side, which I'm most used to. Not good for night vision passive aiming through it or for gas mask use, because you can't get a good cheek weld with gas mask. And with this being off to the side and not in a high position where your nods would be riding, it's not going to be optimal for that, and it's going to be actually pretty difficult to use in those situations. Scratches, getting caught on stuff. I have this little lens cover here that I don't take off because I shoot occluded, so it's not really going to scratch that. But if you don't have a lens cover or something, it is going to be prone more to that. Or if the rifle is dropped, any type of impact it's going to take, it's going to hit this a lot harder because it is in an awkward position sticking out to the side of the rifle, so it will take more impact damage. Using your primary, this is going to be taking up some of the peripheral vision on the right. And when you roll the rifle, your primary, your ACOG or LPVO, is going to be blocking some to the left while you're looking down straight through the red dot. So either way you're looking through your optics, there's just going to be less peripheral view, less field of view that you're able to see. Different from your conventional rifle setups. Most rifle setups have a vertical mounting solution like this ACOG here. Something more to get used to, and the rolling of the shoulder feels a little bit comfortable to me. Fast transition back and forth, switching between my primary and my secondary red dot. Even on this 45-degree angle, this is the most that I have to roll the rifle, and I can snap right back to my primary. It's a quick and smooth transition between the two, consistent, and a good cheek weld right here. I have a full cheek weld on that 1.5-inch mount height, so I'm getting a full point of contact and good stability here. I'm not having to change my posture at all. It's still the same between the two, no lifting of the head. You can cinch the end of the stock down and get a nice clamp on the rifle here and on the stock. Transitioning from targets can be real fast on this offset. On either of them, just depends on the person, but it feels pretty smooth to transition. If I'm on some type of barricade, a mound of dirt, a car hood, I can get a little bit behind it more. My silhouette is lower, my head is lower down, so I'm not sticking up or my head's not straight up. Trying to get that set up in the position and stable at a canted angle can make zeroing a little bit more difficult. If the mount is not directly in line with the barrel, how much that hangs off at that 45-degree angle, that can be a snag hazard. This is able to go in the 35-degree configuration, but because of my battery compartment, that causes a little bit issues there. 45-degree is going to work with most of the LPVOs because of the windage cap on the side, or for example, this battery compartment on the ACOG. Now, if you had an ACOG that wasn't the LED model, this would be a little bit more streamlined, and I believe that you could do the 35-degree mount, which wouldn't hang over as much, and it wouldn't be as much of a cant or as much of an elbow flare, not as much rolling in the 35-degree position. The 45 is most common, does hang off a decent amount for snags, scratches, or if this rifle were to fall, say on this side, or bounce at all, that is going to be more prone to impact damage. If you're in this position for long periods of time, or if you're just not used to shooting like this can be a little bit less comfortable, even though when you're in low ready, this is pretty common to do. You would just lift up and it's right there. So going low ready is not as bad, but going to high ready, that can be a little bit different. It's just a little bit different grip and a little bit different cant of my wrist right here. My elbow on a 45 isn't flared out much. It feels a little bit different in my grip, especially with my left hand. For CQB use, when I'm peeking around to my left, I can do that easily, but when I start peeking around to the right, I have to lean out more and more. This left side is going to be exposed. Then the same for switching shoulders. If I come over here and I don't switch hands, the stock is more in my chest. If I switch arms, still a little bit weird. It's not super conventional. You can kind of lean, and it's not that it's not doable. It's definitely doable. It's going to require more training to get lined up with your dot. The shoulders can be switched, but it's not going to be fast. Being able to switch between shoulders, finding your dot, or switching hands, not going to be as optimal as that top mounted position. For night vision, because it's at that low height, this left tube would get in the way of my ACOG here. If I was only running one tube, I might be able to do it. I still think some things could hit in this right area. It's definitely not optimal having to be super low with night vision. And then the same with gas mask. I'm not going to be able to get a good enough cheek weld to be able to see down that sight in a lower position. My neck and posture is going to be down a little bit lower with this lower mount height, so it's not as comfortable on the neck or on the shoulders. Can it a little bit, you're rolling your rifle and your arm out. Peripheral vision, I can still see pretty good above my ACOG, but when I'm at the ACOG, this does hang out to the right side and it blocks some of my vision over here. Not a whole lot, but it's blocking left to right a little bit in that peripheral as opposed to up and down. In my experience, have not enjoyed shooting top mounted red dots as much with a little bit weaker of a chin weld for stability back there. Now, it being on the top of an ACOG, which is a lower mount and not changing the mount height, having that little bit of chin weld is definitely better than nothing at all. And I think it's for sure usable as long as you're getting some type of connection here. At least in this configuration with the ACOG, I think it looks and feels pretty well. I'll have to get some more time on it. If I don't end up liking it, I'm going to switch back to the top mounted version. What is best for you or what you might choose is going to depend on use case. If you're trying to go more towards night vision, passive aiming use, gas mask use, or a little bit more versatility and ease of use in close quarters or CQB, the top mounted red dot is going to be more catered toward that. Since I do not have night vision, I have a little bit more flexibility of what I'm able to try and able to use. I do have a gas mask, although I'm not shooting a ton in the gas mask, so I don't have to necessarily prioritize the top mount for those things. If you want a more conventional type of shooting, you like that heads up, comfortable shooting position where your neck isn't smashed down as much. It's an upright position. You don't really care about the height over bore, or you're willing to take the extra steps to know your holds at different distances and train that a little bit more and keep that ingrained into your memory. The top mount can be good for you, especially on this ACOG. Top mounted is definitely a good all-around option if you're trying to be more prepared for different scenarios, or if you are wanting to use night vision gas mask in the future and you want to build to kind of set up or prepare for that. Offset is going to be easier to transition back and forth between the two. You're able to keep that nice cheek weld or a little bit more facial structure on the stock. You're not having to worry about height over bore as much. Really just comes down to personal preference, what you're used to, different situations or positions that you think you might be in while shooting the rifle. Top mounted red dot, I think, is a good go-to for a lower mounting system. It's kind of the best of both worlds. You're getting a lot of pros and not as many bad cons. How you are trying to set up this type of optic system for a do-it-all type of rifle, or this is the rifle I'm going to grab to cover the most scenarios, or a variety of different type of engagements at different distances, or act more effectively when you have something that can prioritize close range and something that is more geared towards long range. There's not one optic that does it all, and you're kind of pushed into having to do something like this. The LPVO is the closest, but still doesn't do great at close range. So we're combining optic systems to try to get one rifle to have the most capability possible, where the term comes from the do-it-all rifle or the do-it-all optic system, even though technically nothing can do everything. It's within a certain amount of reason. If you want to see more videos like this, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to help support the channel, and thank you for watching.